So friends, today we will discuss about the best practices to be followed by registered valuers who are registered under IBBI. So we will discuss about the best practices for valuation under IBBI for various asset class. As you know, IBBI, there are three asset class: land and building, plant and machinery, financial securities. So you have to be one of the expertise in one of the category. So all the valuation practices must comply with the company's registered valuers and valuation rules 2017, which set forth rigorous standards for valuation conduct, methodology, application, and reporting requirements. So these three things are important for all of us to maintain. First thing is professional conduct. Second thing is, there are different methods of doing valuation. So what methodology you have to apply for a particular valuation? So that thing is most important. And then what are the reporting requirements as far as IBBI is concerned for a particular valuation? So these three things we will be discussing today for all the three asset classes. So this regulatory structure extends to more than 16 registered value organization as on today, operating across India, creating a nationwide network of qualified professionals. So first we will discuss about the introduction to IBBI valuation framework. So before the IBBI, the valuation profession in India was unregulated practice. So with the advent of IBBI, this profession has been converted from unregulated practice to structured framework. So this was because of growing need for standardized valuation practices across industries and asset classes. For that, a committee was established for the advice on valuation matters in April 2018, and then based upon its advice, so IBBI was designated as the central regulatory authority under the company's rules. So, prior to the IBBI framework, valuation practices in India lacked consistency and regulatory oversight. So, with the establishment of formal guidelines, this gap was addressed, and it bring much needed structure to the profession while elevating standard across all the asset classes. So the purpose of this presentation is to have details of methods which as a valuer we may be using for different asset classes, and to have a method consistency means we have to establish uniform approaches to valuation across different asset classes, ensuring results are comparable and reliable regardless of assets being valued. And then after this methodology consistency, we must have standardized reportings. So valuation reports which are to be submitted, they should be in a standardized format. So we have to define clear reporting requirements for registered valuers, creating transparency and completeness of valuation documentation. Then we have to address the common difficulties which are faced by the valuation professionals in the Indian context, including market data limitation. So this is the most difficult part as far as Indian valuation is concerned, the availability of appropriate data for valuation. So data limitation is most difficult part as far as valuation is concerned. And then with the advent of formation of IBBI, another thing comes into play, that is regulatory complexities. So as you know, as a registered valuer, you have to follow the regulations of IBBI and the RBO of which you are a member. And then we will discuss about the comprehensive guidelines for maintaining professional integrity and ethical conduct, which we should maintain during the entire valuation process. So this presentation aims to serve as a practical guide for valuation professionals, helping them to navigate the complex regulatory landscape while maintaining highest standards of practice in their field. So now we will discuss about the overview of regulatory framework. You know, the with the advent of company IBBI, it was done under companies rules 2017. The purpose of these rules was primary legislation which will be governing the valuation practices in India, and then IBBI provided detailed standards for implementation of these guidelines, and on the basis of IBBI guidelines, all of us has become registered values by having requisite qualification and passing the requisite examination. So even after becoming the member of RVO and registered values, the it is a duty of the RVO to oversight your progress. So the operational management of our profession is in the hands of RVO. So the Companies Act, Registered Valuers and Valuation Rules 2017, it forms a cornerstone of India's valuation regulatory framework. So these rules establish legal foundation upon which IBBI has developed more specific guidelines and standards for the profession. So registration requirements including educational qualification, professional experience, and examination criteria. So these three things of which you have passed through, that is, you have the requisite educational qualification, you have the requisite professional experience, and you have passed the examination as far the IBBI criteria is concerned. So that ensures that only the qualified individuals can practice as registered valuers in India. So the registered valuers organization, they serve as the frontline regulators for IBBI managing the day-to-day oversight of our professional standards. So now we will discuss about the key stakeholders in valuation ecosystem. The first one at the top is IBBI. So this the IBBI is the central regulatory authority. It is responsible for overseeing the entire valuation ecosystem and developing national standards. And then comes RVU. So at present, there are 16 professional organizations that directly manage registered values and provide training to them and enforce compliances as far as IBBI is concerned. And then comes registered values. So you know all of us are registered valuers, and these are qualified professionals who are authorized to conduct valuations across three distinct asset classes, and all of these three work for the service users. So service users are companies, lenders, courts, and other entities that rely on the valuation reports for decision making, which are being done by registered values. So the valuation ecosystem in India operates as an interconnected network of organizations and individuals, each with specific responsibilities. So this structure ensures proper checks and balances while maintaining consistent professional standards across the country. So now you will discuss about the second part of this ecosystem of stakeholders, that is RVO. So registered valuer organization. So what is its purpose and what are the works which is being done by RVUs? So first thing it does is enrollment of values and get them registered with the IBBI. So first thing it does is enrollment management. So RVOs handle the registration of values, verifying their qualification and maintaining membership records. They serve as the primary point of contact for the professional entering into the field of valuation. So their aim, first aim is to enforce the standards of valuations. So these organizations establish and enforce valuation standards specific to their domain, ensuring members adhere to both ethical and technical requirements in their practice. And then professional development. So this is what we are doing today. We are at, all of us are attending this professional development program. So RVUs conduct essential training programs and examinations for aspiring values while offering continuing education opportunities for existing members to maintain their expertise. And then all of you are attending today's class for compliance of IBBI regulations. So the purpose of or the work of the RVU is monitoring compliance. So through regular audits and reviews, RVUs monitor members' compliance with regulatory requirements and handle disciplinary matters when standards are not met. So these 16 registered valuer organizations across India form the backbone of valuation professions, self-regulatory structure operating under IBBI oversight to maintain professional standards and ensure public trust in the valuation services. So asset classes, if you know under IBBI, there are three asset classes. First one is land and building, second is plant and machinery, third one is security and financial assets. So land and building values, you know what they do. This class encompasses all real estate assets, including residential, commercial, industrial properties, and underdeveloped land. So values must have relevant expertise in construction, architecture, or civil engineering. So as a land and building values, you require understanding of local market dynamics, and you have to focus on location, construction quality, and usage potential. So not only the minimum qualification which you must have, along with it, you must have the understanding of local market dynamics, and you need to focus on the location of the property, construction quality of the building or infrastructure, and usage potential of the property of which you are doing valuation. And then next second class, you know, is plant and machinery. So the plant and machinery values, they covers industrial equipment, manufacturing facilities, infrastructure assets, and specialized machinery. So qualification typically requires a mechanical or industrial engineering background. And along with that, you must have technical knowledge of equipment functionality. You must be able to assess the condition and obsolescence factors of the plant and machinery. And the third asset class is securities or financial assets. So it includes equity shares, debt instruments, derivatives, and business valuations. So the valuation of security and financial class asset, they generally have finance, accounting, or business administrative qualifications. And along with them, they must have the ability to analyze the financial statements and projections, and they must understand the market trends and economic factors of in the present scenario. So each asset class, they require distinct methodologies and expertise, reflecting the specialized knowledge needed to accurately assess different types of assets under the IBBI framework. So, as a registered value, you might be registered with the one class, you might be having registration in two classes, or you may be having registration in all the three classes if you have the requisite qualification and requisite experience as far as IBBI rules are concerned. So you know how to become registered valuers. We do not to go in details of that. First of all, you must have a requisite qualification as a valuer. You must be having graduation in the relevant field if you are have to do become a registered valuer, or you must be having post graduation. And if you are to you have to become a valuer in self security and finance class, then you must be having CA, CSR, you must be having MBA with finance, and you must have relevant experience of 3 to 5 years depending upon your qualification. And then first of all, you have to become a member of an RVO. You have to join an approved registered valuer organization. Then you have to complete mandatory orientation program, multi mandatory education program. Then you have to submit your application to the IBBA with the required documentation. Then you have to pay the prescribed registration fee, and after your complete background verification, you will become a IBBA registered valuer. And even after you become a registered valuer, you then there are certain ongoing requirements during your work. You have to complete minimum continuing continuing professional education hours. You have to maintain membership in good standing with RVU, and you have to renew your registration periodically as required under IBBI. So the path to becoming a registered valuer, it involves meeting rigorous educational and experience requirements, followed by formal registration with IBBI and continuous professional development to maintain qualification status. Then code of conduct for registered valuers as far as IBBI registered values are concerned. First thing is integrity and objectivity. So, as far as IBBA registered values is concerned, he must maintain independence and of mind and appearance, avoiding bias, conflict of interest, and undue influence from any parties. So all decisions must be made objectively based on factual evidence and professional judgment. And second thing which the registered valuer must have is confidentiality. So information which you have obtained during your evaluation assignment, it must be kept strictly confidential and not used for personal advantage or disclosed to unauthorized parties. This obligation continues even after the assignment concludes. And third thing is as a registered valuer, you have professional competence. So valuer must only accept the assignments they are qualified to perform. That if you are a registered valuer under land and building, you must not accept assignment of plant and machinery valuation. So you must maintain appropriate knowledge and skills through continuous learning. With when specialized expertise is required, they must disclose limitations or seek assistance of certain experienced and qualified expert. specialized expert in that field. And then representation standards. So whenever you are doing any valuation or any work, you must maintain that all the communications you are doing must be clear, accurate, and not misleading. So valuers must provide complete information about their qualifications, methodologies they have used for that particular valuation, and the conclusion on the basis of the analysis of the documents and the data they have collected and how they have res- reached that conclusion. So all these things should be mentioned in your evaluation report, avoiding omissions and misrepresentations. So the code of conduct serves as the ethical backbone of valuation profession, ensuring that registered valuers maintain the highest standards of professional behaviors in all their activities and interactions with the client and the public. Next is fundamental valuation principles. So you are doing valuation, you have to do valuation based upon certain principles. So you must remember these four things. First thing is fairness and transparency. Second thing is when you are doing valuation, your approach should be evidence based. So anything or you mention in your evaluation report, it must be based upon certain evidence. And then the everything you have assumed that should be mentioned in your documentation. And similar assets under similar conditions should be valued using the same consistent method. So there should be methodological consistency in your evaluation report. So now first we will discuss about the fairness and transparency. So the valuation process conducted by you must be conducted impartially without any bias towards any stakeholder and with full disclosure of methodologies and assumptions you have used during your valuation process. And everything you have mentioned in your valuation report, all the value determinations must be supported by relevant market data, comparable transactions, and other verifiable information rather than mere opinion. Third thing is that all the assumptions, limitations, and conditions that is affecting the valuation of the asset of which you are doing valuation must be clearly documented and explained in the valuation report. And as last but not the least is that similar assets under similar circumstances should be valued using consistent approaches to ensure comparability and reliability of the results. So these fundamental principles from the it forms the foundation of the valuation practice under the IBBI framework. So they ensure that valuations remain objective, reliable, and defensible even when subjected to scrutiny by various stakeholders in insolvency proceedings or in other contexts. So, as a valuer, what are the minimum competencies you must have? So, what are the core competencies which are required for the values? First thing is technical knowledge. So, you must have deep understanding of the specific asset class characteristics of which you are registered and you are doing valuation. And then you must have the ability to analyze financial data and apply valuation models. Means you must have financial acumen. This is especially important for security and finance asset class values, but it is even equally important for all other asset classes that values valuer have the ability to analyze financial data, and he is able to apply it for the different valuation models. And third thing he must have is analytical skills. So critical thinking and problem solving capabilities is important for a value. And he should be proficient in gathering and analyzing market information. So it means he should be research expertise, and he should be able to make fair professional judgment. Fair professional judgment means he should make ethical decisions even in the complex valuation situations. So effective valuers must possess a unique combination of technical expertise and professional skills. Beyond theoretical knowledge, they need practical expertise in applying valuation methodologies and the ability to exercise sound judgment when faced with incomplete information or complex situations. Then, whenever you are doing valuation, you have to follow certain valuation standards, and even you have to mention these valuation standards in your valuation reports. So as far as valuation standards are concerned, IBBI has recognized the international valuation standards, and as a valuer, registered valuers, you may use international valuation standard or the valuation standard of any RVU of which you are, even if you are not member of that RVU, if they have made certain standards, you may use for your valuation. So as far as international valuations are concerned, IBBI acknowledges globally recognized standards such as those from the International Valuation Standard Councils. So these are the standards which are recognized by IBBI, that is IVSC standards, International Valuation Standard Councils. Second one is Royal Institution of Surveyors, means RICS standards, and American Society of Appraisal Standards, ASI standards, as reference points for the best practices. So these standards provide a framework that can be adopted to the Indian conditions while maintaining international compatibility. So as far as these international standards are concerned, you have to adopt them as far as Indian conditions are concerned, though you have to maintain international compatibility. So it means you have to compare them with the Indian practices. That is important when you are using international valuation standards. So while international standards emphasize market value as a primary basis for valuation, Indian practice sometimes requires additional consideration, such as when you are doing valuation for IBBI, you may have to give liquidation value, as in the case of insolvency. So the IBBI framework incorporates elements of international standards while addressing Indian specific legal and regulation requirements, creating a hybrid approach that maintains global credibility. So harmonizing international standards with the domestic requirements enables Indian valuers to produce reports that meet global expectations while complying with the local regulations. This balance is particularly important as India's economy becomes increasingly integrated with global markets. So next thing that is valuation So documentation must be clearly state that the valuation date. So when you are doing valuation, this is important. You have to clearly mention the valuation date and the reference period. This is particularly important for security and finance asset class values. They have to mention the reference period, as these temporal factors can significantly impact the determined value, particularly for volatile assets or during unstable economic conditions. So when you are doing valuation, we you know the valuation process. So it contains certain things which are pre-requirements, and there are certain things which are post requirement of valuation. So first thing is pre-engagement. So while you have to do the valuation, you must establish scope of the valuation, you must confirm independence, and you must define the terms of the valuation. So once these three things are established, means scope, independence, and terms of the valuation is established, then your duty is to collect and verify the relevant data. Next step is information gathering. Information gathering, it includes collection of data and verification of that collected data, that collected relevant data particularly. And then based upon these two things, scope, terms, and data, you have to choose a relevant methodology. So based upon these things, you choose and apply appropriate valuation approach for the valuation. So then that you once you choose the requisite method, you determine the value based upon applied methodologies and make your conclusion based upon the analysis you have done of the collected data. And once you have done all these things, you have to provide evaluation in the report format. So you have to document findings according to the standards. So the valuation process follows a structured approach designed to ensure thoroughness, accuracy, and defensibility of final value conclusion. So each step builds upon previous one, creating a logical progression from initial client engagement to final value determination. So throughout this process, the valuer must maintain detailed documentation of decisions, methodologies, and information sources to support the conclusion reached and demonstrate compliance with professional standards. Just a minute, I will be back. So now we will discuss about the pre-engagement considerations. First of all, you have to check what is the scope of your evaluation. So you have to define the scope. So before starting with your work, clearly define the purpose of valuation. That is important. So, with a change in the purpose of valuation, the whole process will change, whole value will change. So, first of all, clearly define the purpose of valuation. And then, second thing you have to check is assets to be valued. First, you choose purpose of valuation. Then, second thing you have to check is assets which are to be valued. And third thing, intended use of the valuation. So these three things are important before starting the work. Purpose of valuation, assets to be valued, and intended use of the valuation report. So this establishes boundaries for the assignment and helps to determine appropriate methodologies you have to choose. And once these three things are determined, then second part is you have to check conflict. You have to make a check on the conflict. So perform thorough conflict or of interest assessment to ensure independence and objectivity. So you have to identify and address that if there is any relationship with the client or the subject assets that could compromise impartiality. So you must not have any interest in the assets of which you are doing valuation, and you must not have any relationship with the client of for which you are doing valuation. That is, you have to check these things before starting with work. And then after these two things, then third thing is fee structure. So before starting your work, establish clear fee arrangement based upon complexity and scope of valuation, avoiding contingent fees that could create actual or perceived conflict of interest in the valuation outcome. So that is important. So first of all, these things are clear. You have the with you the scope of valuation. You know what are the assets to be valued. You know that you do not have any conflict of interest in the asset of which you are doing valuation, and you have this fee structure with the client. Client is ready to pay the uh, fee which is you have asked for, and after that you ask for a engagement letter before starting your work. So formalize the agreement with the detailed engagement letter outlining your responsibility, timeline. These things are to be should be there in your engagement letter. First thing is your responsibilities and the time frame within which you have to complete your work, and the terms of service to prevent misunderstanding later in the process of valuation. So proper pre-engagement process procedures set the foundation for a successful valuation assignment. So taking time to clarify expectations, identify potential use, and formalize potential issues, and the relationship helps avoid complex complications and dispute during later stages of the valuation process. So once this pre-engagement process is completed, then your next step is information collection and analysis. So first of all, you collect all the requisite required documentations. You get the, in case of land and building valuation, you should collect the title deed and ownership records of the assets. For financial asset class, you must have financial statements and projections of the company. For plant and machinery values, they must have technical specifications and conditional reports of the plants and machinery, and they must have historical transaction data. So these are the minimum required documentation for starting your work. And then next step after collecting the document is physical inspection. For land and building valuers or for plant and machinery valuers, they have to conduct thorough site visits. They have to document physical conditions of the assets with the photographs. So they have to assess the functionality and maintenance status of this is especially important for products and machinery values. They have to assess the functionalities of the machinery and maintenance status of the machinery. And they have to identify factors affecting the value not evident in the documents. So after doing these two things, getting required documentations and physical inspection of the assets, next thing is verification of procedure. So you have to verify whatever the data you have collected with the cross reference multiple information sources. You have to conduct the authenticity check of the documents you have collected. You have the verified the data with the independent third parties, and you have to do documented information reliability assessment. So after all these things, you have to do market research. So these are the things which you have collected from the client, and all the data are all the things which you have collected from the client, and then you have to go to the market for market research. So from the market, you gather comparable transaction data, analyze the industry trends and economic conditions, and review regulatory environment affecting asset value. Consult with the industry specialists wherever necessary. So these are the things which you have to get from the market. Means comparable transaction data. Then you have to analyze industry trends and at the present time, and what are the economic conditions, local as well as national. Then you have to review regulatory environment that might affect the asset values, and then you may have to consult with the industry specialist when it is necessary. So the quality of information directly impact the valuation accuracy. So as a registered value, you must exercise professional skepticism when reviewing information provided by the clients, seeking independent verification whenever possible, and clearly documenting any limitations in the information available. So next thing before starting your valuation process is you have to decide upon the valuation methodologies. So generally there are three valuation approaches, cost approach, market approach, and income approach. So cost approach as a registered value, it is based upon the principle of substitution. It means a buyer will pay no more for an asset than the cost to replace it with an equivalent asset. So in this case, what we do, first of all, we calculate the replacement cost of the asset in the new conditions, that is called replacement cost new. Then we have to make adjustment for the physical deteriorations. Then we have to consider the functional and economical obsolescence of the asset. So, considering all these things, you will be calculating the depreciated replacement cost of the structures. So, this method is most appropriate for specialized assets with limited market data or recently constructed properties or recent properties. Second method is market approach. So this method is based upon comparing the subject asset to the similar assets that have been sold or offered for sale in the relevant market. So in this case, what we do, first of all, we identify the comparable transactions. Then we make certain adjustment for differences in the characteristics of the subject property and the comparable you have collected. And then you have to apply relevant multiples and metrics to arrive at a range of values. So from that range of value, you have to give a particular value. So as we all know, this market approach does not give you a particular value. It gives you a range of value or from which you have to decide about one of the value. So this method is reliable when sufficient comparable data exists in the active market. And the third method, which is generally used for income fetching property, that is income approach. This approach is based upon the expectations of future benefits from the asset, and that future benefits are converted into the present value. So there are certain methods. First of all, you have to calculate the cash flow projection development, and then you have to decide about the discount rate. And if you are doing evaluation, especially upon income approach, you have to decide upon the terminal value, how you have to achieve that, calculate the terminal value calculation. So these things are important in case of income approach. So this approach is particularly relevant for income producing assets and business valuations. So the selection of appropriate methodology depends upon asset characteristics, available information, and valuation purpose. Multiple approaches are often used to provide cross validation with final determination considering the relative reliability of each method. So now we will discuss about best practices for different asset class. First, we will discuss about the best practices for land and building valuation. So for land and building valuation, do you know there are two things involved in it? One is land, and the second part is building. So for land valuation, what you have to do? You have to utilize comparative methods for land, adjusting for location, size, zoning, and development potentials. It means you have to use market approach for calculation of the value of the land by using comparable method and making certain adjustment based upon the location, size, zoning, and development potential of that asset. So direct comparison with recent transactions in similar locations provides most reliable indicator of land value. So once the value of the land is determined, then your aim is to calculate the building cost. So what we do in the case of building, calculation of building cost, we apply detailed cost estimation using current construction rates, considering structural elements, finishes, and building services. So factors in quality of construction and specification relevant to the market standards. So by using this building cost estimation, we calculate the replacement cost of the new build. So, but building is not always new. It have certain age and it has certain deficiencies with the passage of age. So we have to consider that as physical deterioration. So we have also to consider obsolescence and other things which might have reduced the value of the building. So for that, you have to calculate a depreciation assessment. So you evaluate physical deterioration based upon age and condition. Then you have to calculate functional analysis obsolescence from the outdated design and economic obsolescence from external factors affecting utility or value. So after all these things, the main thing or another important point is use of the property. So you have to consider when you are doing valuation for certain in certain conditions you might have to use highest and best use of the property. So analyze the most profitable, legally permissible. So whenever you are doing valuation based upon highest and best use, the these are the things that are important. First thing is most profitable use, legally permissible use that is physically possible and financially feasible. So four things are important for highest and best use. You know, first is profit, most profitable. It should be most profitable. It should be legally permissible, legally allowable, and it should be physically possible, and it should be functionally, financially feasible. So as these represents the use that will generate the highest value for the property. So for the land and building values, they must follow these four things. So property valuation requires consideration of both macro and micro factors. You know these two things, macro and micro, that influence value. So while location remains a paramount, other aspects such as legal restrictions, physical characteristics, and market conditions must be thoroughly analyzed to determine the accurate value of the property. And as far as plant and machinery valuers are concerned, we will now discuss about the best practices which are to be followed by the plant and machinery values. First thing you have to do is technical specification analysis. So while doing valuation, you must conduct detailed assessment of machinery specifications, including capacity, power requirements of the machinery, precision capabilities of the machinery, and the production efficiencies. So compare specifications to current industry standards to identify technological position relevant to the modern equivalent. So after doing this technical specification analysis, you have to determine the useful life of the asset. So evaluate the physical condition, maintenance history, and operating environment to establish remaining useful life of the building. So consider with both physical life, how long it can function. Physical life means how long it can. So you know there are two types of life. One is physical life and other is function economic life. Physical life means how long it can functions in any condition. And economic life means how long it remains competitive, it remains profitable to use for a particular purpose. So you have to calculate both these lives, physical as well as economic life of the asset. So once you have done this, you have to then do the assessment of obsolescence. So you identify the functional obsolescence means design limitations compared to the modern alternative. Then technological obsolescence means outdated technology. And economic obsolescence means external factors which are reducing the utility of the assets. So quantify the impact of each obsolescence type on the value. So after going all through all these three steps, then your last step is determination of value. So calculate replacement cost new, then apply appropriate depreciation factor based on condition and obsolescence assessment. Consider installation cost, commissioning expenses, and any customization requirement in the valuation, final valuation. So this is a way how you calculate the final value of a plant and machinery. So plant and machinery valuation requires specialized technical knowledge combined with the financial analysis skills. The rapidly evolving nature of technology makes obsolescence assessment particularly critical in the asset class. Then for security and financial asset valuation, first thing is equity valuation methods. So implement multiple approaches including discounted cash flow analysis, comparable company analysis, and precedented transactions. Each method provides different insights. So discount cash flow captures intrinsic value based on future cash generation. The second method, that is comparable companies, it reflects the current market sentiments. And the third method, precedented transactions incorporate control premium. Then for debt instrumentation valuations, you have to apply yield-based approaches that consider current interest rate environment, credit risk assessment of the issuer, remaining term to maturity, embedded options or conversion features, liquidity consideration in secondary markets. And for business valuation fundamentals, you have to consider both entity level and equity level valuation. So under business valuation, you may have to do enterprise value. It represents the total business value of the company. Then equity value, it represents the ownership interest after that. Then you have to adjust for the control and marketability. For that, you have to apply certain factors. And then you have to evaluate both tangible and intangible assets, valuation of both tangible and intangible assets. So the financial asset valuation, it typically involves greater complexity due to the need to model future economic benefits and the market behavior. So the rapidly changing nature of financial markets also require values to stay current with economic trends and valuation theory development. Then when you have to do valuation under special circumstances, so you may have to do valuation under special circumstances, such as when you are doing valuation of distressed assets, when you are doing valuation under liquidation scenario, when you are doing valuation of startups, or when you are doing valuation by taking into consideration the intangible part of the asset. So what are the best practices that you have to follow when you are doing valuation under these special circumstances? So when first we will discuss about the valuation of distressed assets. So when you are valuing assets which are under financial distress, you have to consider time frame for realization, limited market periods, and potential buyer perception of forced sale. So these factors typically result in valuation below normal market conditions, requiring careful documentation of these circumstances, special circumstances. And then in case of liquidation, when you are doing valuation in liquidation scenario, so liquidation value, it is a value which requires a valuation of assets on a piecemeal basis rather than going concern. So consider dismantling cost, removal expenses, and limited marketability. The focus shifts from future running potentials to immediate realizable value through expedited sales. So this is important. So when you are doing valuation under liquidations, here the focus of the valuation is shift from future earning potentials to immediate realizable value through expedited sales. Then when you are doing valuation of startup, so when you are doing valuation of startup, the main challenge is that early stage companies, they present unique valuation challenges due to limited operating history, unproven proven business models, and uncertain future prospects. So in this case, we heavily rely upon the market comparables and the milestone achievement analysis of the startup and scenario based forecast approaches. So this is most of one of the difficult part with the limited operating history and limited data for valuation. The value, it is very difficult to most difficult part when you are doing valuation of a startup. And then when you are doing valuation of intangible asset, for intangible assets like intellectual property, brand value, and customer relationship, utilize specialized methods such as relief from royalty, excess earnings, or replacement cost approaches. So documents that eh, the circumstances require application to standard valuation methodologies. The valuer must communicate how these circumstances influence the approaches taken and resulting value conclusion. So now we will discuss about the valuation in insolvency proceedings. First, as a valuer, you must know the things which are important when you are doing valuation from insolvency. First thing, you must know the difference between fair value and liquidation value. Second thing important is timing consideration. And third thing, you must know the stakeholders' perspective. So, what is the stakeholders' perspective of the in the asset of which you are doing the valuation? So, as far as fair value and liquidation value is concerned, in insolvency context, so we are talking about insolvency context. So, values must typically provide both fair value, assuming a reasonable market period, and liquidation value, assuming forced sales. So, see these things. Fair value is when you have reasonable marketing period, and liquidation value when there is forced sale. The, the gap between these values can be substantial and represents the potential value preservation and bankruptcy classification of both value to inform stakeholder decision making. Then timing consideration. So during when you are doing valuation in the case of insolvency, timing is very important. So valuation timing is critical in insolvency proceedings. So maybe you have to do valuation for pre-filing valuation that establish the baseline, or you may have to do valuation during the proceedings to inform the restructuring plans, or you may have to do the valuation for post reorganization valuation to measure the success. So value will depend upon the timing at which you are doing the valuation. It may be pre-filing, before filing of the insolvency proceedings, so which will form the baseline of value, or it may be that during the insolvency proceedings you have to do the valuation. It may be for the restructuring plan, and then you might be doing valuation for post reorganization, which determines the success of your plan. So each valuation point serves different stakeholders and purpose within the process. And then you have to take into consideration the stakeholders' perspective. So different stakeholders have distinct valuation concerns. Creditors focus on recovery rates and security value. Debtors emphasize going concern potential. And courts they require objective defensible valuations. So values must maintain independence while acknowledging these perspectives. Insolvency valuations carry heightened scrutiny and often face challenges from various stakeholders, comprehensive documentation of assumptions and methodologies, and is essential to withstand this scrutiny. So, limitations and challenges in valuation. So, what type of asset class you are valuers, you have certain limitations and challenges while you are doing valuation. First thing is in Indian consent, as far as the Indian context is concerned, is information asymmetry. So availability of sufficient information is very important for valuation, which is very difficult in Indian context. So limited access to complete information about assets, market conditions, or comparable transactions. So it is very limited in India's context. Then market volatility, conditions affecting the asset values and creating uncertainty. And then each industry has its own specific issues. So unique factors in a specialized sectors that complicate the comparison and valuation. And third and the fourth thing is regulatory constraints. So maybe that legal and regulatory restrictions that may limit the valuation approaches are available information. So every valuation faces inherent limitations that must be transparently communicated to the users of valuation reports rather than undermining the valuation. Properly documented limitations provide context for understanding the degree of confidence appropriate for concluded value. Professional values must strike a balance between acknowledging these challenges and providing actionable valuation conclusions. Despite them, so this requires both technical expertise and professional judgment. तो ठीक है संदीप जी, जो मैं हैव टी ब्रेक को लगता है सभी
Yes, sir.
है ना. We will continue with the same after a short tea break.
Yes, sir. So friends, it is 11:30 now. We will take a short tea break of 20 minutes. We will join sharp at 11:50. 11:50 पे दोबारा जुड़ेंगे. Till then, you can switch off your screens. Sir, I think you are not audible.
Okay, sir. Just hold. So this we have already done. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
we
You are
have
audible.
already discussed about valuation in insolvency proceedings, and then we have discussed about the limitations and challenges in valuation. Next is, so as far as the Indian context in valuation is concerned, we are having limited access to the data while doing the valuation. So whenever you are doing valuation with limited information, limited data, how you can proceed? So first thing is important is you must know the information gathering techniques. So when you face with the information gaps, employ multiple collection strategies. So from where you can collect the data, that is important. So as a valuer, you must know the sources of valuation. Sources of data which you require for valuation. It includes public record research, industry database, regulatory filings, and specialized information services. That is important thing. So when faced with the information gaps, employ multiple collection strategies which includes public records research, industry databases, regulatory filings, and specialized information services. So, as a valuer, you should develop a systematic approach to identify and acquire critical data points from alternative sources. And then, next thing in this scenario, while you are working with limited information, is external source utilization. So leverage external information sources, which includes industry reports, government database, academic studies, and market research publications. So cross-reference information from multiple sources to establish reliability when primary documentation is available. So you can use this procedure. So whenever there is a problem that you are not having primary documentation, so then what you can do? You can go for industry reports, you can go for government databases, you can go for academic studies and market market research publications. So that is that it is not only that you have continuous professional development programs. So here we can discuss the sources from which you can collect the data. But it is for you to have all these things in your day-to-day work. You should not only involve yourself in valuation report, you must have certain time for devotion for all these things. You should collect the industrial reports. You should devote some time for collecting government databases, and of course this academic studies. So many academic studies are these days. The number of persons are doing PhDs or masters, and where they are doing academic studies, and they are being published on the internet. You can collect that things that are that may be helpful in your day-to-day work. And this there are certain market research publications for different asset classes which you should subscribe, so that you are able to do justifications to your valuation work. So cross-reference of information from multiple sources is very important to establish reliability when primary documentation is available. And then In such a scenario, the most important factor is which estimation method you use for arriving at a particular value. So apply appropriate estimation techniques such as extrapolation from limited data points, benchmarking against industry standards, and development of proxy indicators. So it is not only that you have the knowledge of your asset class, you must be having certain knowledge of statistics, which you have already studied in your 50 hours MEP, and you should apply that things in your day-to-day work. You should be able to do extrapolation from the limited data points. You should be able to benchmark against industry standards. And of course, you should be able to develop proxy indicators. So documentation, methodology, assumptions, and the rationale for each estimation to maintain transparency. So this is most important. So whatever you have done, you should maintain a documentation of all that, those things. So you should follow that. You have to maintain document of the methodology of, and you should have the record of assumptions you have made and the rationale for each estimation. So you have to keep the record of all these things. And then most important thing is confidence level assessment. So that is what this IBB has done. It has able to make you confident, increase your confidence level. That is why these CEPs are being done. So clearly communicate the impact of information limitations on valuation reliability. Consider using valuation ranges rather than point estimates when information gaps create significant uncertainty. So this is important. So when there is significant uncertainty, so you should go for a range of values rather than a point estimate. So that is important thing. Generally, in case of market approach, we generally use this methodology and explicitly state confidence level in different components of the valuation. That is important. So you should maintain a confidence level as a registered value. So working with the limited information is a common challenge that requires creativity, diligence, and transparent communications. By documenting both the limitations and the steps which you have taken to mitigate them, the valuer maintains professional standards even when ideal information is unavailable. And then whatever you have done so far, you have to present in a report form. So what should be the report structure and what should be the format? What are the minimum things which it should contain? First thing is you have to provide a executive summary of whatever you have done as far as valuation is concerned. So in executive summary, you have to give concise the overview of the assignment, the methodology you have used, and in the end you have to provide value conclusion. So means you have to give a summary of how you have arrived at a particular value, which methodology you have used. Then you have to give introduction and scope of the valuation. In this case, you have to provide detailed description of the property, detailed description of the valuation purpose, for what purpose you are doing valuation, then how you have done the asset identification and the engagement parameters. Then next part in your valuation report is information and analysis. So your report should provide comprehensive documentation about the data sources from which you have collected the data and the market research you have done. And then it should give the analytical process you have done for arriving at a particular value. So after that, you have to give about the methodology which you have selected, why you have selected a particular methodology, how you have applied that methodology, and you have to give the complete details of the calculations which are involved in the valuation. So after doing all these things, you have to arrive at a particular value. So you have to conclude your valuation with the final determination with reconciliation of methods and confidence assessment. So with that, you have to provide supporting documents, detailed calculation, and reference materials in the appendices, which should be attached with your valuation report. So IBBI guidelines emphasize structured, comprehensive reports that provide sufficient details for users to understand the valuation process and conclusions. While the specific format may vary by asset class and purpose, maintaining the logical organization and complete documentation is essential for valuation report. So these are the minimum things which your valuation report should contain. So it depends upon case to case. So now we will discuss in details about the various things we have discussed in the last slide. That is executive summary requirements. What are the requirements which are to be given? What are the things which are to be mentioned in the executive summary? So executive summary must provide a concise overview of the entire valuation, including, so what it should give? It should provide overview of the entire valuation process. It should include purpose, date, asset description, and methodology adopted and value conclusion. So this is what your executive summary should contain. Means it should contain overview of the entire valuation process. It should provide purpose of the valuation. It should give the date on which this valuation is being done, and the asset description, methodology you have adopted, and the value conclusion. So in it should be comprehensive yet succinct enough for busy executive to grasp essential information quickly. So as far as assignment description is concerned, what it should be, if your valuation report should give. This section must clearly define the scope of work, identify the client and the intended user. So see here. In this case, you have to apply scope of work, identify the client and the intended user, state the valuation purpose, and specify the basis of value. These are the things which you have to mention in assignment description. For example, whether you are doing calculating fair value of the asset, whether you are calculating liquidation value of the asset, so that is basis of value. So it establishes the parameters and the limitations of the valuation methodology as engagement. And then in the information sources part, you should provide a detailed inventory of all the information sources consulted, including documents reviewed, interviews conducted, site visits permitted, and third-party data utilized. So these are the things which you should mention in the information part, means inventory of all the sources consulted, including documents reviewed, interview conducted, site visits performed and third-party data utilized. So this include assessment of information reliability and verification procedures which you have undertaken for doing the valuation. So then you have to choose a particular method and then you have to justify why that particular method has been adopted by you. That you have to give method justification in your evaluation report. So explain the rationale for selecting a specific valuation approaches, why certain methodology were deemed appropriate or inappropriate, and how these choices relate to the asset characteristics and valuation purposes. So a well-structured valuation report serves as both a communication tool and a record of values professional judgment. The report must contain sufficient information for readers to understand not just what the value was determined, but how and why that conclusion was reached. See here, what your valuation report should give. That is important thing is what value was determined, how it was determined, and why that conclusion was reached. That is important. That in your valuation report. So IBBI has given a detailed information about caveat limitations and disclosures, which you may mention in your valuation report. So how you can handle these caveats and limitations? So now we will discuss that thing. First thing is in 2020, IBBI has given certain reg regulations for caveat limitations and disclosures. So they have given issued specific guidelines in 2020 addressing the appropriate use of caveat limitations in valuation reports. So these guidelines aim to balance the necessary disclosures with maintaining utility and reliability of valuation opinions. So now we will discuss about the appropriate caveats and limitations which you can use in your evaluation report. Otherwise, we have already discussed these things in our CPT where we will have discussed caveat limitations and the disclosures for a particular asset class. So as far as evaluation is concerned, what type of caveat you may use? So caveats should focus on the genuine limitations that materially affect the valuation process. So see this thing, what is caveat and what should you can mention in the caveat? It should focus on the genuine limitations that materially affect the valuation process. So what that can be, for example, such as restricted access to the information, limited market data, or unusual asset characteristics. So avoid generic disclaimers that undermines the entire valuation process. So this is what you can mention in the valuation report about the caveats. So next thing is what are the things which you can mention as limitation in your valuation report. So there is first thing you must understand and you must thing is that you should be able to distinguish between standard limitations inherent to all valuations and standard specific limitation unique to a particular assignment. That is important thing. So there are certain limitations which are generally available in all the cases, but if all the particular cases they are having certain specific limitations. So here you should clearly explain how each limitation impacts the valuation process and conclusion. That is important. So it is not only that you have to mention these caveats and limitations, but at the same time, you have to prove yourself with the documentations. So for each material limitations, documents efforts made to mitigate its impact, alternative approaches considered, and how the limitation influence the final valuations. This demonstrates professional diligence despite constraints. So this thing is very important while you are mentioning caveat limitations, and it is not only that you have to mention their certain caveats, limitations, and disclosures, but you have to mention that how these things may affect the value conclusion. That is also important. So proper handling of caveat limitations protect both the values and the report users. So by transparency, communicating constraints while maintaining professional responsibility for conclusions, valuers fulfill their ethical obligations while providing practical, useful valuation opinions. And then assumptions are also important. So how you can document assumptions. So how documenting assumption is done. First thing is you must clearly understand the different types of assumptions. So types of assumptions. Valuer reports must differentiate between general assumptions, which are generally there in all the asset, all the valuations which you are doing, and there there may be certain assumptions which are specific for a particular valuation. So general assumptions, they are standard premise that apply to most valuation. So for example, clear title or compliance with the regulations. So these are general assumptions where we assume that the title of the property is clear and it is generally complying with the construction of the building is generally complying with the asset, or the in case of plant and machinery we assume that the building is plant is being run as per the regulations for that particular industry. So that are general assumptions. And there may be certain special assumptions for a particular assignment which you are doing. So hypothetical conditions specific to the assignment, for example, assumed completion of development theoretical occupancy rates. And then there may be certain extraordinary assumptions. Assumptions about uncertain information that, if found to be incorrect, could alter the valuation significantly. So, as a value, you must have the knowledge about the type of assumption, the difference between them, and how you can overcome these limitations from these assumptions. That is important. So, how you can overcome these limitations? So now we will discuss about that reasonable testing, how you can do the testing of each significant assumption must undergo reasonable assessment. So that is important. So first thing is market based value validations using comparable evidence. So whatever assumptions you have to face, you have to validate it using market based comparable evidence. Then you can check its sensitivity by determining its value or its impact on the value. You can do benchmark comparison against industry standards, and internal consistency. You can do is internal consistency check across the valuation model. So this is how you can reasonably test the assumptions. So next thing is that for each material assumption, you must be having documentary. You must document these material assumptions in your valuation report. So in that, you must mention rationale for making the assumptions. Then you must provide supporting evidence or basis for that assumptions. You must give alternative assumptions which you have considered in your valuation report. And important thing is, what is the potential effect if the assumptions proves to be incorrect? That is important. So that you have to mention in your valuation report. So this is how you can document the assumptions. So assumptions form the foundation of any valuation and must be both rational, reasonable, and thoroughly documented. So transparent communication of assumptions allow report users to understand the conceptual framework underlying the valuation conclusion. Then for a valuer, you have to maintain quality control on your work. How you can carry out that quality control in your evaluation practice? First thing, you must have internal review procedures in your firm. So you must have systematic quality checks throughout the evaluation process. So for that, you must have internal review procedures in your firm. Second thing is, you should contain you should maintain comprehensive records of all the valuation steps you have taken. So after that, the important thing is peer review. So once you have prepared a report, so it should be independently assessed by qualified colleagues in your firm. And then another important thing is error reductions. So proactive identification and correction of the issues is important before the issuing of valuation report. And then you must maintain consistency of your work. So for consistency verification, you should align, check across methods and reports. So these are the various things which you can do for maintaining the quality control in your valuation practice. So quality control must be integrated throughout the valuation process rather than applied only at the end. So that is important. It is not that you are applying quality control at the end of the report. It should be an integrated process throughout the valuation process. So establishing systematic procedures for review, verifications, and documentation helps prevent errors, identify inconsistencies, and ensures compliance with the professional standards. So CEV, IAF, RVO now require formal quality control policies as part of their membership requirements, reflecting the increasing emphasis on quality in evaluation profession. Then next thing for best practices is you have to maintain ethics in your valuation practice. First thing is you must have professional excellence. So your commitment to the highest standard is important for maintaining professional ethics. Second thing is you should work with freedom from undue influence from anyone. Means you should maintain independence in your work. And most important thing is honesty and moral uprightness. Those means you should maintain integrity, and you by doing all these things you will automatically form a public trust, so which is important for foundation of professional practice. So ethical practice forms the cornerstone of valuation profession. Independence requires mandate, that valuers remain free from relationship or influences that could compromise their professional judgment. This include avoiding conflict of interest and declining engagements where independence could be questioned. So fee structure must never be contingent on valuation outcome, as this creates inherent conflict of interest. Similarly, confidentiality obligations extend beyond client engagements, protecting sensitive information even after assignment concludes. Professional skepticism, maintaining a questioning mind, and critical assessment of information is essential throughout the evaluation process. So now we will discuss in details. So now we have already discussed in short the various best practices. Now we'll discuss in some detail the best practices which are to be maintained for different asset classes. First of all, we will discuss about the best practices in land and building asset class. So as a valuer of land and building asset class, you must be conversant with the different approaches, different methods which you may use for doing valuation. First, first method is comparable sale method. This approach identifies recent sales of similar
Friends, please note
properties.
these approaches, these best practices are not mentioned in any book available in the market. So it is very important to understand each and everything for your particular asset class, how to provide a valuation report. And before signing, you must assure that these best practices to be followed for your safety as a valuer, and no any negative uh, decision can be taken against you during your peer review or any other inspection process. Yes, sir. Please continue. Sorry to interrupt.
So first approach, first method is comparable sale method. This approach identifies recent sales of similar properties, adjusts for differences in characteristics, and uses the adjusted comparables to estimate the subject property's value. So it is particularly effective in active markets with sufficient transaction data. So first thing is that you must know the basic of this approach. And the second thing is where particularly you can use. That is, you can use it in, it is particularly effective in active markets where sufficient transaction data is available. And second approach you can know is income capitalization. So in this, what we do, we convert the future properties expected future income into a present value by using an appropriate capitalization rate. So it is especially relevant for commercial property, rental housing, and other income generating real estate. That the third method is cost approach. So cost approach, which is generally we have been using this approach. So what it does, it first of all, in this case, we calculate the cost to replicate the property using the current construction rates. Then we adjust for depreciation and obsolescence. So it is mostly useful for specialized properties with limited market comparables, such as for hospitals, schools, or industrial facilities. And another method, which is a part combination of these three methods, that is residual methods. So in residual method, what we do, we estimate the value for development properties by calculating the completed project value and then deducting the development cost. So whenever you are doing valuation of a developed property which is to be developed, such as let us suppose you have to do the valuation of a mall. So at the time of valuation, it is only the land which is available. But then from the architectural drawings, and other times you may have to calculate the future value of the property. From that you will deduct the cost which is involved, and from there you have to deduct the development cost, cost of financing, and developers profit to arrive at the residual land value. So this is an important method which as on the present scenario many times most of the values they have to do valuation of some un- undergoing projects or new projects. So there, the only way is to do the valuation based upon development method or residual method. So you must be conversant with this method in present scenario. So the selection of valuation approach depends upon property type, available data, and the purpose of valuation. So for most commercial property, multiple approaches should be applied to provide cross validation with final value reflecting the reliability of each method in the specific circumstances. So in land and building, how you can do the market research? First thing is you can collect the data required from the local market. So comprehensive market research for land and building valuation requires systematic collection of relevant data from multiple sources. From where you can get this data from property transactions record from registrar's office. You can collect data from listing databases from real estate agencies, from government valuation records when available, local developer project information, and from the industry reports from real estate consultants. So this is how you can collect the data from the local market. And then for market research, you should be having conversant with the comparable adjustment techniques. So after collecting this data, this is raw data. So you have to convert this raw data into useful data. So this raw comparison data must be adjusted for meaningful analysis. That is important. Not only the collection, but the converting this raw data into meaningful data. You must be having sufficient knowledge. For that, what you can do, what you have to do, you may have to do adjustment for the time, for the market changes is the transaction date. Then for the location adjustments based upon the relative desirability, then you may have to carry out adjustment due to difference in size and configuration, etc., between the comparable and the subject property. Then you may have to do adjustment for legal status such as title, permissions, restrictions, etc. Then you may have to do adjustment for conditions and quality adjustment. So, so it is not only these comparable adjustment techniques you should also know the various market analysis factors which may affect the value. So beyond individual property data, broader market analysis may have to be carried out by the valuer. So which include supply and demand dynamics in specific some market, development pipeline affecting the future supply, infrastructure projects impacting the accessibility, regulatory changes affecting the development potential, and economic trends influencing the property in demand. So, what we have been doing so far, we have been using these two things in your valuation report. But the third thing, which is also important for land and building values, they should be having sufficient knowledge that how to carry out this market analysis factors such as supply and demand dynamics, development pipelines affecting the future supply, infrastructure projects in the nearby which may be affecting the accessibility, and then regulatory changes in the recent coming time which may be affecting the development potentials, and economic trends which may be influence the property demand. So Through market research, the thorough market research forms the foundation of credible property valuation. The quality and depth of market analysis directly impact the reliability of resulting valuations, particularly when using market-based approaches. So next is when you are doing valuation for land and building, there may be certain special considerations, special conditions when you may have to do consider them in your valuation reports. What are these special considerations? So first thing, most of us know the difference between leasehold and freehold property. So but you have to take these considerations in your valuation report also. So valuation must account for fundamental differences between freehold, absolute ownership property and leasehold properties, time limited rights. So leasehold valuation requires detailed analyzing of lease terms, including duration, rent, review mechanism, and restrictions, etc. And then you must consider the development potentials. So many times the properties which are which have not used full FAR, then in that case, when you are doing valuation in certain cases where full FAR has not been used, so you can assess the unutilized development rights, including additional floor area ratio, change of use possibility, and subdivision potentials. So development value requires analysis of highest and best use scenario, construction cost, and market demand. So this development potential is to be taken into consideration while doing valuation. And then important thing, infrastructure impact. So evaluate how existing and planned infrastructure affect the property value. That is also important, which we are have our evaluation reports have been missing so far. We never consider these two things in our valuation report. Unutilized development right, including additional FAR. And second thing we have been ignoring is how existing and planned infrastructure may affect the property value. So consider proximity to transportation, network, utilities, availability, and most important, which we generally do not consider in our valuation report, is upcoming infrastructure projects that could significantly impact the accessibility and utility of the structure. And then regulatory restrictions. So though most of the for valuation formats of the banks, they contain all these things, but we generally try to fill all the columns and rows rather than considering the facts. So you have to take into consideration all the facts. So we generally, when they ask about the zoning regulation, we generally write it is in residential zone or commercial zone. But what are the facts we generally do not mention? So even we generally do not mention about the heritage effect. So you have to identify zoning regulations, heritage designation, environmental protection, and other legal constraints that may limit property use or development potentials, directly affect the market value. So these are the special considerations. Mind it, these are very important for a land and building value to consider, we generally ignore. So special considerations often have substantial impact on the property value that may be overlooked in standard valuation. See here approaches. So please never overlook these special consideration in your valuation approach. So thorough analysis of these factors ensures valuation captures all significant value drivers and regulations. Similarly, for plant and machinery, we will discuss about the valuation approaches. So, as in the case of land and building, there are again those approaches are applicable to plant and machinery valuers also, but there may be certain differences between them in the procedures. So, in replacement cost method, what we do, so the primary approach for specialized equipment, this is used for specialized equipment. Here, what we do, as in the case of land, here also we calculate the current replacement cost for new equipment with the equivalent utility. So here, the what you have to do, you have to determine current replacement cost for the new equipment with equivalent utility, and then for the given asset for which you are doing the valuation, you have to calculate physical deterioration based upon its age, condition, and maintenance history of the asset. Then you have to assess the functional obsolescence from technological advances and design improvements with the passage of time. And then you have to evaluate the economic obsolescence from the external factors, which is reducing the utility. So by considering all these things, you will be arriving at the final value, which will be equals to replacement cost minus all the forms of depreciation, means physical, functional obsolescence, and economic obsolescence. So next method in her plant and machinery is market comparison challenges. So while theoretically sound, market comparison approaches often faces practical limitations because in this case you have limited transactions for the specialized equipment, and then there is difficulty in obtaining complete and verified sales information. So there may be substantial difference between the nominally similar equipment, and then market distortion in secondary equipment markets. So while usable, market data provides valuable reliability check on other approaches. And the third approach, is income approach, how it is applied in case of plant and machinery. For revenue generating equipment, income approach is considered direct income generation capacity. So it is here in this, as in the case of land and building, you are generally dealing with direct income generation capacity, but here it is not only the direct generation capacity, income generation capacity, it is you may also have to consider cost saving compared to the alternatives, production efficiency improvements, and remaining equipment life expectancy. These things have also to be taken into consideration by the plant and machinery values. So it is particularly relevant for leased equipment or complete production lines. So the selection of valuation approach must consider the purpose of valuation, equipment characteristics, and available information. Most comprehensive valuations utilize multiple approaches to provide cross validations. So, in case of you, we have already to consider physical as well as economical life, but how you can first understand, know as a plant and machinery. For calculating physical life, you must evaluate the mechanical structural integrity of the plant. For economic life analysis, you must assess its economic life from the competitiveness against newer alternatives. And for technological obsolescence, you have to compare features of the asset of which you are doing valuation with the current technological standards. And for maintenance impact, you have to review history and quality of maintenance programs. And the most important thing, compared to the typical lifespan for similar equipment in the industry benchmark. So useful life assessment forms a critical component of plant and machinery valuation, particularly when using depreciated replacement cost methods. The distinction between physical life means how long the asset can function, and economic life, that is how long it can remain competitive, means it will be viable to use that equipment. So that is economical life. Is especially important for technology dependent equipment. So industry benchmarks provide useful reference points but must be adjusted for specific usage pattern, operating environments, and maintenance practices. Documentation of useful life determination should include both quantitative data and qualitative factors affecting the assessment. And what are the special considerations for plant and machinery valuations? First thing is installation and commissioning. That is to be taken into consideration also. So beyond the base equipment cost, valuation must consider installation expenses including foundation, preparation, utility connections, calibrations, and commissioning. So these things are also to be considered. Means installation expenses, foundation preparation, utility connections, and calibration, and of course, commissioning. So these costs can represent 15 to 40 the equipment complexity. Then for a particular or do carry out certain modifications in the equipment to make it fit for the use in that particular industry. So many industrial assets undergo significant customization for specific applications. So these modifications may enhance value for a current use, but see here the problem is. So these modifications may enhance value for current use, but potentially reduce value in secondary markets. So when you are doing valuation, you have to check whether it will be able to it or not. So because it is particular industry. So each modification must be assessed for its contribution to or detraction from the overall value. And then important thing which is very so inventory, specialized tools and accessories. So each machinery requires spare parts at different time. So you must take into consideration the assessment of associated spare part, specialized tools for that particular plant, and the accessories. So these sporting assets can represent significant value, particularly for the equipment where parts are expensive or difficult to source. And then important thing, control system and software. So sophisticated control system and specialized softwares. So these components may represent substantial value but faced rapid obsolescence. So this is also important. So though these components have substantial value, But with the in the present scenario, they may face rapid obsolescence. So licensing arrangements, update availability, and compatibility with the current system. So plant and machinery valuation extend beyond the physical equipment to encompass all components necessary for functional operation. So comprehensive assessment must consider the complete system rather than isolated components to arrive at particular valuation. Then for the third asset class, sorry, not third class, sorry, third asset class, that is financial asset class. So first of all, for this class, we will discuss about the equity valuation methods. So first method is a discounted cash flow analysis. So as all of us are conversant with the discount cash flow analysis, what we do in it this DCF values a business based on projected future cash flows discounted to present value. What we do, we convert the projected future cash flow to the present value by discounting it. So this is forward-looking approach captures intrinsic value based on expected financial performance rather than historical results or market sentiments. And then the second method in SFA for SFA class asset class values is comparable company analysis. So this method identifies similar publicly traded companies for which we calculate relevant valuation multiples, that is P upon E, EV upon EBI, DTA, etc., and apply appropriate multiples to the subject company's matrices. So adjustment for size, growth, and risk references are essential. Third method is precedent transactions. So this method analyzes actual transactions involving similar companies to determine appropriate valuation multiples. This approach inherently includes control premiums, but requires adjustment for market conditions, strategic considerations, and synergy factors. And then for particular asset, you may have asset-based approach for determining, in this case, what we determine the equity value by assessing the fair value of all the assets and deducting all liability. So this is important, particularly relevant for holding companies, asset-intensive business or companies with significant intangible assets. So comprehensive equity valuations typically employ multiple methods to develop a range of value indications. So different methods may receive varying weights based on the quality of available information, business characteristics, and valuation purpose. And then here we in these methods was for equity valuation. For debt valuation, we may be using different methods. First method is a present value technique. So in this case, what we do, debt instruments are primarily valued by discounting future cash flow, means interest payments and principal payments to the present value. So this requires constructing a schedule of all the expected cash flows and applying an appropriate discount rates that reflects current market conditions and issuer specific risk. Second method is yield curve analysis for debt valuation. So what this method do? In this method analysis. So here what we do, we can do yield curve analysis. So in this case, what we do, we examine the rates for similar term instruments across risk categories. So the valuer must construct reference relevant yield curves based on government securities, then add appropriate spreads for credit risk, liquidity, and other factors. Third method for debt valuation is credit risk assessment. So in this case, valuer evaluate the issuer's ability to meet payment obligation, which is critical for debt valuation. This involves analyzing financial statements, debt coverage ratio, industry position, and other factors affecting default probability. For unrated issues, synthetic rating may be developed through comparative analysis. And then the last method for debt valuation is special features. Last thing which you have may be using special feature considerations. So many debt instruments contains or variables. Industry features require specialized valuation techniques, often involving option pricing model or simulation methods to properly capture their value impact. So debt valuation requires consideration for both issue specific factors and broader market conditions. Changes in interest rates environments can substantially impact debt values even when the issuer's credit quality remains unchanged. Now we will discuss the procedures for business valuation. First procedure is a going concern principles. So business valuations typically assumes that ongoing operations rather than liquidation, focusing on earning capacity and future prospects. This approach requires assessment of sustainable earnings, growth potential, competitive position, and management quality. So the going concern assumption must be tested for reasonableness, particularly for distressed business or those in the declining industries. Next thing you must understand is the difference between enterprise and equity value. So the distinction between enterprise value means total business value, and equity value means ownership interest is fundamental. So enterprise value, it is equals to equity value. It represents the entire business regardless of financing, and equity value, it represents only the shareholders' interest. So valuation methods must consistently apply either approach with appropriate conversion between them. Then, as a SFA value, you must understand the valuation adjustment. So for that may be for a particular assignment. So several critical adjustments affect the business valuation. First thing is control premium. So additional value for controlling interest. Then minority discount, reduction for the non-controlling positions. Then marketability discount, that is reduction for illiquid investment. Then synergy value means additional value in acquisition scenario. So these adjustment must reflect specific circumstances rather than applying standardized percentages. So business valuation reports represents one of the most complex areas of financial asset valuation, requiring integration of financial analysis, industry knowledge, and economic forecasting. Then we will discuss about the discount cash flow analysis, which is generally used by the asset valuers. So what we do in this case, first of all, we determine the cash flow projections. So develop a detailed projections for 5 to 10 years. Then base initial years on the bottom up budgets, ensure consistency with historical performance, and in line with the industry and economic forecast. So once these cash flow projections are determined, then you have to determine the discount rate which you have to use for determination. So what you can do For determining the discount rate, calculate the weighted average cost of capital, then consider capital structure implications, which is reflecting the industry and the company specific risk, and then you make certain adjustment for country risk wherever applicable. So once these two things are known to you, means cash flow projections and discount rate. So another important thing is determination or calculation of terminal value. So for terminal value, you may have to apply perpetuity growth or exit multiple method. So apply one of them. Then ensure sustainable growth assumptions. Consider long-term industry outlook and avoid overestimating terminal value contributions. And then you have to carry out sensitivity analysis, test the impact of varying key assumptions, develop alternative scenario, identify value drivers and risk factors, and present range of possible values. So discount cash flow analysis represents one of the most theoretically sound valuation approaches, capturing the fundamental principle that an asset's value equals the present value of its future economic benefits. The quality of DCF valuation depends heavily on the reasonableness of projections and appropriateness of the discount rate. So next is cost of capital determination. How the cost of capital is determined. So for that we generally use weighted cost, average cost of capital. So it represents a blend of cost of all capital sources used by the company. See here, what is the cost of capital? It is cost of all capital sources used by the company, weighted by their relative proportions in the capital structure. For most Indian companies, WACC typically range from 12 to 18%, depending upon the size of the industry and risk profile. The equity component is typically calculating using capital asset pricing model, which is cost of equity, equals to risk minus free rate plus beta into market risk premium plus size premium plus company specific premium. The risk free rate is generally based on 10-year government rates, government bonds, while the market risk premium typically ranges from 5 to 8% in Indian context. So beta determination requires careful analysis of comparable companies adjusted for financial leverage differences. Size premium acknowledge the high risk of similar companies, while company-specific premiums capture unique risk not reflected in the beta. So next is valuation adjustment and discounts. First is control premium. So what is control premium? A control premium represents the additional value attributed to a controlling interest in a business, reflecting the ability to direct strategy, operations, and capital application. In Indian context, control premiums may typically vary from a range of 20 to 40%, depending upon the extent of operational improvements possible, quality of existing management, strategic value to the specific acquirer, and industry consolidation opportunity. Then you have to take into consideration minority discount. So what is minority discount? The minority discount reflects the reduced value of non-controlling interest due to interest inability to influence company decisions. This discount is theoretically the inverse of the control premium, but may differ due to specific factors such as statutory protections for minority stakeholders, dividend policy and distribution history, information transparency and governance quality, presence of other significant minority shareholders. Next is marketability discount. So marketability discount reflects the reduced value of the illiquid investment that cannot be readily converted to cash. For private company in India, this discount typically ranges from 15% to 35%, which is influenced by company size and financial stability, potential buyers universe, time and cost to complete a transaction, regulatory transactions on transfers. So these adjustments must be determined based on specific circumstances rather than applying standard percentages. Detailed support for each adjustment should be documented in the valuation. And then the most important thing is reconciliation and value conclusions. So how you can reconcile and conclude the value. First is multiple method application. So best practice requires applying several valuation approaches to provide cross validation. So each method offers different insights. Income approaches capture future earnings, potential market approaches reflect current investor sentiment, and asset approach establishes value floor based on owned resources. Next is when you are reconciling the valuation is approach weighing. So determine relative reliability of each approach based on information quality, asset characteristics, and valuation purpose. Assign weights according to the greater emphasis on methods with stronger conceptual fit and better information support. So document weight is rational clarity. Then most important thing is range development. So develop a portable resolution range rather than focusing on solely on a point estimates. So this acknowledges inherent estimation uncertainty while providing practical guidance. Consider both statistical measures, mean standard deviation, etc., and scenario face analysis and range development. And then based on all these, you have to arrive at a final value. Then how this final value can be computed? Determine the final value based upon weighted results, professional judgment, and purpose-specific considerations. Provide clear explanation of reconciliation process, highlighting factors that most significantly influence conclusion within the identified range. The reconciliation process transforms multiple value indications into a coherent, defensible conclusion rather than simply averaging results. Reconciliation requires critical analysis of strength and weakness of each approach in a specific context. So basically, what you have to do in reconciliation, you have to consider that the strength and weakness of each approach for that particular specific context for which you are doing valuation. Then documentation and record keeping. So in best practicing, this is very important. First thing is work paper requirement. So maintain comprehensive documentation of all valuation work, including information received, analysis performed, discussion with management, site visits, and calculation details. Work papers should be sufficient for another qualified professional to replicate the valuation process. and understand the basis for the conclusion. Then important thing is retention policies. Establish clear record retention policies that comply with the both regulatory requirement and professional standards. So, as you know, as a IBBI values, you must have learned this thing that IBBI rules require maintaining the required records for at least 3 years after the completion of the assignment with proper indexing and security measures to ensure retrievability and confidentiality. And of course, you may have you may maintain the record electronically. So, because in today's scenario, these are very important. So, implement appropriate systems for electronic record management, including regular backups, access controls, and versioning. Electronic recording should include both final reports and supporting documents with proper authentication mechanism to prevent unauthorized alterations.
And this
And
slide is
then,
very, very important for inspection purposes also. If you have received any mail for any inspection process to be done at your premises or for a registered valuer, then you have to follow these protocols and you have to complete these things for completing your inspection process. Yes, sir. Please continue.
the next thing is confidentiality protocol. That is important. Develop and enforce strict confidentiality procedures for all client information, including physical access restrictions, confidentiality agreements with staff. So this is important thing. First thing, you should have physical access restriction. Second, please do have confidentiality agreement with your staff. You have to maintain this. This may be checked when any of you, one of you may be subjected to inspection. They may have to check these things. And third thing, secure disposal methods for outdated material. These three things are important. So information sharing should follow the need to know principle. That is important. So proper documentation serves multiple purposes, demonstrating professional diligence, providing support for conclusion if challenged, enable quality control reviews, and creating institutional knowledge that benefits future valuations. Now, now these are not part of your was not part of your IBBA syllabus, but now you know technology has made inroads in the valuation practice, and as a valuer, you must be conversant with the new technologies which are being used by the valuers worldwide. So, for particular asset class, you have valuation softwares. So, special for softwares, they streamline complex calculations, ensures methodological consistency, and reduces mathematical error. Leading platforms provide industry-specific templates, built-in databases, and automated sensitivity analysis capabilities. So nowadays, valuation softwares are available for a particular asset classes. And then
फ्रेंड्स
for
यहाँ पर
data
मैं सर एक मिनट फ्रेंड्स यहाँ पर मैं आपको रिकमेंड करूंगा कभी भी कोई भी ऐसा सॉफ्टवेयर मत लीजिए जिसमें डाटा डेवलपर के एंड पे रिकॉर्ड होता हो अगर डेवलपर के एंड पे डाटा रिकॉर्ड हो रहा है देन इट इज वेरी 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 रिस्की फॉर योर प्रोफेशन कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी जहां कहीं भी टूटेगी वहां पर आप जिम्मेदार होंगे। अगर आपकी तरफ से डाटा कहीं भी लीक हुआ है या आपका वैल्यूएशन का डाटा कहीं भी लीक हुआ है, उसका सोर्स कोई भी हो, यू शैल बी हेल्ड रेस्पॉन्सिबल। एंड उसके लिए बहुत टेक्निकल कॉम्प्लिकेशंस हैं, कोर्ट केस भी हो सकता है आपका, और भी काफी नुकसान हो सकता है। अगर आपने कोई भी एम्प्लॉय अपॉइंट किया है जिसका अप्रोच आपके डॉक्यूमेंटेशन तक है, तो उससे कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी डॉक्यूमेंट आपको साइन कराना ही पड़ेगा। अगर कोई भी डाटा किसी भी लेवल पे आपके तरफ से लीक किया जाता है या ऐसा एज्यूम किया जाए कि जो डाटा आपके पास है और वो मार्केट में अवेलेबल है, तो आप you shall be held responsible for all the consequences, and consequences in India is very very tough। तो आपको ये पता होना चाहिए, इसको लाइटली मत लीजिए। इवन अगर आपने जो आपके पास जो डाटा है पुराना, वो आप कैसे डिस्पोज ऑफ करते हैं, ये भी आपकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है। अगर आपके पास पुरानी डीड्स है, पुराना डाटा है, पुराना कंपनी का रिकॉर्ड है किसी का, अगर वो आप कैसे डिस्ट्रॉय करते हैं, कैसे उसको डिस्पोज ऑफ करते हैं, ये भी आपकी रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है। अगर वो डाटा किसी भी लेवल पे मार्केट में अवेलेबल होता है, देन यू शैल बी हेल्ड रेस्पॉन्सिबल अंडर दिस क्लॉज। एंड कॉम्प्लिकेशंस और कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस बहुत बहुत टफ हैं, तो इसलिए इसको लाइटली बिल्कुल मत लीजिए। यस सर, प्लीज कंटिन्यू।
So then for data analysis, there are certain tools available. So advanced analytical tools which enable processing of large data sets, identification of patterns and correlations, are more sophisticated market analysis. So these are basically important for SFA valuers, but they are equally important for other asset class also. So these capabilities are particularly valuable for market approach methodologies requiring extensive comparable data analysis. Then nowadays for collecting market databases, you can have subscription-based market information services are available, which provide access to the transaction data, financial benchmarks. So see here, so transaction data, financial benchmarks, and industry metrics that would be impractical to compile manually. So nowadays these are available online. So these resources improve the quality and breadth of market inputs to the valuation. But you have to be very careful while you are using this data. Guys, they may or may not be reflecting the true pictures. So you have to verify that data also at your level. And then for report generations, certain softwares are certain available, so which have automated report generation tools which ensures consistency in format and content while reducing production time. So these systems can incorporate standard language for regulatory compliance while allowing customization for specific assignment needs. So technology adoption in valuation practice continues to accelerate, enabling more sophisticated analysis and improved efficiency. However, technology remains a tool that complements rather than replaces professional judgment, which remains essential for methodology selection, assumption development, and final value reconciliation. So now we will discuss about some of the common pitfalls in the valuation practice you may encounter. First thing is anchoring bias. So many times, many of us tend to rely too heavily on the initial information or value estimate, affecting the subsequent analysis. So you should avoid that thing. Second is single method bias. So when you are using doing valuation, so never rely on a single method. Please try to do, though you may mention only one method, but try to calculate the value based upon at least two or three methods so that you are able to arrive at a proper valuation. So overemphasis on one valuation approach without cross validation from alternative methodology, which, which is very dangerous. And this is where we generally suffers. We generally do not involve in sufficient research. Insufficient research, it leads to many complications. So inadequate market investigations leading to incomplete understanding of value drivers that may land you in troubles. And then undocumented assumptions. So we have already discussed that whenever you assume anything, you have to document it. So failure to explicitly state and support key assumptions underlying the valuation that may also lead you to trouble in future. And the most important thing is economic blindness. So neglecting broader economic conditions present at the local and the national levels that influence the asset value and market dynamics. Please do not ignore that thing. So these five things have to be taken into consideration while you are doing valuation. So awareness of common pitfalls helps values implement specific measures to avoid them. Structured review processes, explicit documentation requirements, and formal methodological framework all serve to mitigate these risks. The most effective safeguard against valuation pitfall is cultivating professional skepticism, maintaining a questioning mindset that challenges information, test assumptions, and consider alternative perspective throughout the valuation process. So now we will discuss certain case studies. So before that, we can have a short rebreak. So Devji, we can have a short rebreak.
Yes, sir. So friends, let's take a short tea break of 10 minutes. Sir, 10 or 15 minutes?
10 minutes.
Okay, it is 1:25 now. We will rejoin sharp at 1:35. Till then, you can switch off your screens. Refreshment break, short refreshment break.
Okay, Sandeep ji, let us start.
चलो भाई नहीं आ रही
नहीं हमें तो आ रही है आवाज मतलब there must be a problem.
Maybe there is certain problem with their system.
voice
Okay.
is clear sir
Okay, so next we will be taking one example of all the three assets classes that will make the things clear. So these are just examples how you can approach your valuation. First, we will be taking the case study of land and building. Let us suppose we are doing the valuation of a commercial office building in a prime business district at Mumbai. It is a 18,000 square feet of leasable area across 12 floors. Current occupancy rate is 85%. Average lease rate is 120 rupees per square feet per month. Building age is 8 years with good maintenance, and land area is 12,000 square feet freehold property. So what we use? We apply multiple methodologies for calculation its value. From income approach, we do the capitalization of stabilized net operating income at 8% capitalization rate, which yielded the value as 132 crore. Then from the comparables, as we get the data collected for five similar properties, and after analysis these property with the proper adjustment, it yielded a value of 128 crore. And from the cost approach with the land value plus depreciated replacement cost, the value comes out to be 140 crore. And then in the reconciliation process, so weighted reconciliation based on methodology reliability. So income approach, for income approach, we assume 50% weightage as because of strong net operating income of history. For the comparable sales method, we assume 40% weightage because of good market data. And for cost approach, we give 10% weightage. So because the properties which we have collected data was a newer property, it was a 8-year-old property, we give it, assuming it to be older building. So we give it only 10% weightage. So the final reconciled value was 131.2 crore. So this case demonstrates the application of multiple valuation approaches and their reconciliation based on relative reliability of each method given the specific property characteristics and available information. So this is how you can apply reconciliation process, which we have been missing so far in our valuation processes which we haven't using. We are simply using only one method and giving the result by that method only. So basically it is important you use all the methods and apply a weighted reconciliation method so that you are able to justify your value. And now we will be taking a case of a plant and machinery valuation. So assets identification, it is a CNC machining center for automotive component. It is 5 years. It is having 5 years in operation with moderate uses and regular maintenance. From the technical assessment, it was revealed that detailed inspection revealed that for 70%, its physical life is 70% remaining, with minor wear on the critical components. From the obsolescence analysis, it was found that functional obsolescence was 15% due to newer models available in the market with 20% higher greater efficiency, and then economic obsolescence of 10% from the industry overcapacity. So from that, we determine the replacement cost of the uh, components or the machinery was 1.8 crore, less combined depreciation and obsolescence of 40%. So the which yield the fair value as 1.08 crore. So this case studies illustrates the comprehensive approach required for plant and machinery valuation, particularly the detailed assessment of physical condition, technical specifications, and various forms of obsolescence that impact value beyond simple age-based depreciation. So what we have been doing so far, we have been using only age-based depreciation. We have to take into consideration other things such as functional obsolescence and economic obsolescence into consideration. So the valuation considered not only the machine's current physical condition, but also economic utility compared to its modern alternatives and market conditions affecting value realization. So this multifaceted analysis ensured the valuation reflected all relevant value factors. So now we will be taking an example of financial asset class. So let us suppose we have to do the valuation of a company. It is a mid-sized pharmaceutical manufacturer with a specialty generic focus. The revenue it is generating a revenue of 250 crore with the 15% historical growth rate. EBITDA margin is 22%, whereas the industry average is 18%. So purpose of the valuation is potential minority investment by private equity firm. So three primary valuation methods were applied in this case. The discount cash flow analysis was used using a 5 years projection with 15% initial growth tapering to 7% terminal growth, discounted at 16.5% WACC, weighted average cost, yielding an enterprise value of 650 crore. And then the second method, we use the market approach, in which we analyze 8 comparable public companies with oblique EBITDA multiples ranging from 9 times to 15 times. After adjustment for size, growth, and margin differences, an appropriate multiple of 12 times was applied to LTM EBITDA of 55 crores, yielding a value of 660 crores. And then the third method, recent transaction analysis, in which three relevant acquisitions were identified with multiples from 11 times to 14 times of EBITDA. So applying a 12.5 times multiple yielded a resulting value of 680.7.5 crore. After reconciliation with 40% weightage to DCF, 30% to comparable companies, and 30% to the transactions analysis, the concluded enterprise value was 665 crore. So a 20% discount for lack of marketability was applied to the equity value for the minority investment. So next thing in your best practices, you must, as a valuer or a registered valuer with IBBI, you have to have professional development. So for that, annual CPD hours are 16. Minimum continuing professional development hours are required yearly, of which 12 hours are to be devoted to the technical content, means minimum hours in valuation specific technical training, that is 12 hours, and minimum 4 hours are to be focused on professional ethics and standards. So you have to maintain 100% documentation. So you required compliance with CPD required keeping standards. So registered values must fulfill continuing professional development requirements to maintain their registration status. These requirements ensure that values remain current with the evolving methodologies, regulatory changes, and professional standards. Recognized training can be obtained through programs offered by RVUs, IBBI approved institutions, and certain international valuation organizations. So values must maintain a detailed record of all the professional development activities, including certificates of completion, program content description, and learning outcome. So this is important thing. So you have to keep a 100% record of all the professional development activities you have undertaken, you have undergone, including the certificates of completions, you have the programs you have attended, program contents descriptions, and the learning outcomes. You must maintain all the records with you. Then recent regulatory developments. So recent amendments to the valuation guideline focusing on enhanced documentation requirements and more structured reporting formats, particularly for insolvency related valuations. You have to refer to the IBBI guidelines, which are being updated from time to time. And you have to keep yourself updated with the changes in the Company Act. So modifications to the Company Act provisions, which are affecting valuation requirements for corporate transactions, including share issuance, mergers, and business requirements. And then all the RVUs, they are going for their own standards. They are evaluation of RVO standards. So development of more detailed and specified standard by RVO, creating greater consistency across professional while addressing asset specific consideration. And as an RV, you have to keep yourself conversant with the judicial precedents. So recent court decisions which are affecting the valuation practice, particularly regarding the weight given to the different valuation approaches and the required level of supporting documentation. So the regulatory landscape for valuation in India continues to evolve rapidly as the profession matures. Valuers must stay with these developments through regular monitoring of IBBI communications, RVU updates, and relevant legal proceedings. And next is handling valuation disputes. So whenever you are doing valuation or you are in the valuation profession, you may have to face certain valuation disputes. First thing is you must know what are the common dispute sources, how you can prevent them, and in case there is dispute, how you can resolve them. What are the dispute resolution mechanisms? You must be conversant with these things. First thing you
Friends,
must know is
जैसा
common
मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया है, a valuer is not known by the number of valuation he is doing per month or per year in his career. A valuer is known by the number of cases he is able to defend in case of any dispute or any litigation. अगर एक भी डिस्प्यूट आपका कॉज क्रिएट होता है तो आपके पूरे वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशन के ऊपर ताला लग सकता है. तो a valuer is known by the number of cases he is able to defend in case of any dispute or litigation. That must be kept in mind by every valuer. Not he is not known by the number of cases he is doing per day, per month, per year, or per quarter. Yes, sir. Please continue.
So first you should know the common dispute sources. So valuation disputes typically rise from several sources. First thing is main problem is methodology selection disagreement. So maybe that as a valuer, one valuer is using income approach, second valuer is using cap cost approach, and third valuer is using market approach. So mainly the problem arises from the selection of approach you have used for the valuation. So either you use a multiple approach as we have discussed, so that you are able to give valuation based upon weightage given to assigning to each the methods, or you should be able to justify why you have used only that particular method. So second thing is differing assumptions about future performance. So most of the time there is difference in opinion about the assumptions about the future performance of the asset. Then there may be certain disagreement on comparable selections. Then there may be disputes over adjustment factors, control premium, discounts, etc. And then differing interpretation of factual information. So these are the common dispute sources about your valuation. So how you can save yourself? First thing is you must have preventive documentation. So comprehensive documentation reduces the dispute likelihood. First things, you must have clear engagement terms defining the scope and limitations. So this is important thing. So whenever you are entering into a new assignment, please do have a clear engagement letter which is giving you complete details of about the terms and conditions, scope and limitations. Then you must apply a transparent methodology with proper explanation and justification.
देखिए, जब भी आपका
Then
इंस्पेक्शन मार्क होगा और इंस्पेक्शन टीम आपके प्रेमिसेस को विजिट करेगी, उनका सबसे पहला क्वेश्चन होगा शो द एंगेजमेंट लेटर एंड टर्म्स एंड कंडीशंस एंड स्कोप एंड लिमिटेशंस. तो अगर आपके पास एंगेजमेंट लेटर नहीं है तो वहीं से नेगेटिविटी शुरू हो जाएगी. तो बिना गलती किए, बिफोर स्टार्टिंग द प्रोजेक्ट, बिफोर हैंडलिंग द प्रोजेक्ट, बिफोर एक्सेप्टिंग द प्रोजेक्ट, आपको एंगेजमेंट लेटर उनसे लेना है और उसमें बिल्कुल क्लियर लैंग्वेज में आपकी टर्म्स, कंडीशंस, लिमिटेशंस एंड स्कोप सब कुछ क्लियरली मेंशन होना चाहिए. कौन से डॉक्यूमेंट आपको प्रोवाइड किए जाएंगे, कौन से डॉक्यूमेंट आपको प्रोवाइड नहीं किए जाएंगे, क्या आपको डॉक्यूमेंटेशन चाहिए, क्या आपको नहीं चाहिए, कितना टाइम लगेगा, कितना फीस होगा, कितना ड्यूरेशन लगेगा, कब आप रिपोर्ट सबमिट करेंगे, क्या आपकी कंडीशंस होंगी. ये सब कुछ आपके एंगेजमेंट लेटर में होना चाहिए. अगर एंगेजमेंट लेटर आपके पास नहीं है तो बहुत ज्यादा चांसेस हैं कि आपका इंस्पेक्शन प्रोसेस में आपको प्रॉब्लम फेस करनी पड़े। यस सर, प्लीज कंटिन्यू।
So next is transparent methodology explanation and justification means you should be able to explain why that methodology you have used. Then explicit statement of all the material assumptions. So we have already discussed that all the assumptions should be documented, that why that particular assumption has been made and what impact it will made in the on the valuation if that assumption was not true. So next thing is thorough information source documentation. So you must maintain proper documentation of all the sources from where you have collected the data. And then clear explanation of professional judgment factors. So if you take care of all these 5 points, you will be able that you are not having any dispute, or if any dispute arises about your valuation, you are able to defend yourself if you have taken care of these 5 things. And then dispute resolution mechanism. So when dispute arise, several resolution approaches exist. Joint review by opposing values to identify differences. Independent third-party value review. Mediation with the valuation expertise. Arbitration with industry-specific knowledge. Judicial proceedings as a last resort. So courts typically give substantial weightage to the valuation that demonstrate methodological rigor, comprehensive documentation, and adherence to the professional standards. When testifying as expert witness, valuers must maintain objectivity and independence rather than advocating for specific outcomes. So, as far as international valuations procedure, the framework is concerned, here we will discuss about the comparative analysis of different countries, different regions as compared to Indian regions or Asian regions. As far as US valuation framework is concerned, they are having multiple professional organizations such as ASA, AICPA, etc., with specialized standards for different contexts. Compared to India, US practice places greater emphasis on fair value or financial reporting and has more developed standard for intangible asset valuation. So this is a difference between Indian and US standards. As far as European approach is concerned, European valuation is influenced by RICS and TIGOA standards with strong emphasis on real estate valuation. The European framework features more prospective methodological guidance than the Indian system, particularly for mortgage lending valuations. And as far as Asian markets are concerned, other Asian market shows varying approaches with Singapore and Hong Kong following more international models, while China has developed distinct standards with greater government involvement. Japan emphasizes income approaches for real estate more heavily than in India. So, as far as global valuation standards are concerned, global valuation practices are gradually converging through influence of international valuation standards, IBS, multinational accounting firms, and cross-border transactions requiring comparable approaches. So, India's valuation framework incorporates elements from multiple international models while adapting to local requirements and market conditions. Continued harmonization with the global standards while maintaining India-specific provisions appears to be a developing trend. Now we will discuss about the future of valuation practice in India. So as you know, IBBI has transformed the valuation scenario in India from an unregulated professional field to a regulated professional field. So, with the continuous improvement in the valuation standards, we are moving towards professional excellence as in the developed countries. And with the advanced analyticals and AI applications, and we are moving towards technological integrations. So I request all of you to be conversant with these advanced analytical tools and AI applications. So yeah, so that you are able to improve your work, valuation work. And then deeper expertise in specific asset niche specialization growth with the increasing harmony with the international standards, cross-border valuations. We are aligning with the global, we are having global alignments. And because of all these things, because of professional excellence, moving towards professional excellence and technological international integrations, we are forming a public trust, which is foundation of our valuation profession. So the valuation profession in India is poised for significant evaluation as regulatory framework mature and market sophistication increases. Emerging technology will likely transform valuation practice through advanced data analytics, automated comparables, identification, and AI-assisted valuation models. So professional specialization will likely increase as the market demand deepens. Expertise in areas like intellectual property valuation, complex valuation instruments, and specialized industrial assets. Meanwhile, cross-border transactions will drive greater alignment with international standards while maintaining India-specific requirements. Then, now, as all IBBI has only three asset classes: land and building, plant and machinery, and the SFA class. But there are certain specialized assets for which valuations are required in today's scenarios, such as intellectual property rights, natural resources assets, and infrastructure assets. So now you, as a IBBI value, you may not be able to do the valuation because if you are not having the knowledge of that particular asset. But you must be in today's scenarios, you must be conversant with these things. First is you must know what is intellectual property valuation. So IP valuation, it requires specialized methodologies reflecting the unique characteristics of patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. So the approaches which we generally use in this are relief from royalty method, excess earnings approach, technological factor method, option-based valuation for early stage IP. So these assets present particular challenges due to their uniqueness and difficulty in establishing the reliable market comparison. Then in case of natural resources assets, such as for mining, oil and gas, and other natural resources, these assets require specialized evaluation considering reserve estimation technique, extraction cost projections, commodity price forecasting, regulatory and environmental factors. So now these seems to be part of plant and machinery or SFA classes, but the values need specialized knowledge of the subject for doing valuation of such things. So these valuation typically involves collaboration between valuation professionals and technical expert in geology or engineering. So third thing is infrastructure assets. So infrastructure valuation must consider long-term commission assignments, regulatory pricing frameworks, public service obligations, maintenance and replacement cycles. So these assets often involve complex contractual arrangements that significantly impact value beyond physical characteristics. So specialized assets require values to develop domain specific knowledge or collaborate with the subject matter experts to ensure all relevant value factors are properly considered. Next is valuation in financial reporting. So for financial reporting, you may have to do the valuation for fair value requirement or impairment testing for purchase price allocation or disclosure requirements. If you are doing it for fair value requirements, so Indian accounting standards, Indian AS increasingly require fair value measurement for various assets and liabilities. These standards align with the International Financial Reporting Standards IFRS and specify when fair value must be used for initial recognition, subsequent measurements, or disclosure purposes. Then for testing, regular impairment testing requires comparing carrying, carrying values to recoverable amounts, typically based on fair value less cost of disposal or value in use calculations. These assessments involve cash flow projections, discount rate determination, and grouping assets into appropriate cash generating units. Then for purchase price allocations, such as in case of business combinations, it requires allocating purchase considerations to identifiable assets and liability at fair value with residual goodwill recognitions. This process involves identifying and valuing intangible assets not previously recognized, including customer relationships, technology, and brands. So these things have to be taken into consideration while you are doing valuation for financial reporting for purchase price allocation. That is customer relationship, technological, and brand value. Then for disclosure requirement, financial reporting valuation must include extensive disclosure about the methodologies, significant inputs, sensitivity analysis, and valuation hierarchy classifications. These disclosures provide financial statement users with the information to assess valuation reliability and risk. So valuation for financial reporting purposes must meet both accounting standard requirements and general valuation principles. Close collaboration between valuers and auditors is essential to ensure accepted methodologies that will withstand audit scrutiny. And then ESG consideration in valuation. This is a newer thing which is there in valuation, that is environmental, social, governing consideration. ESG means environmental, social, governing. So you may become an ESG value. This is specifically important for SFA class values who can become ESG values by having attending certain trainings and getting certifications. They can become ESG values. Otherwise, even if they are not doing valuation for ESG, they have many times we have to take into consideration these things, that is environmental, social, and governance factors into our valuation. So environmental factors like climate change risk, resource efficiency, pollution, etc., may be taken into consideration while we are doing valuation. So next is social elements. In social elements, means the labor practices being followed by the company, the community relationship it has with the general public, and the product safety. These things are considered for social elements. And then governance aspect. So how the company is being run means board structure, executive compensation, ethics policies of the companies, these governance aspects. So these three things are taken into considerations in today's scenarios when we are doing valuation of companies. These may increase or decrease the value. So these factors are very important to be considered. That is ESG consideration in valuation. So reporting integration. So nowadays you have to make a disclosure of ESG impact in the valuation reports, especially the SFA values. They have to take into consideration these ESG factors into consideration. So environmental, social, and governance factors increasingly influence asset values across all classes. Environmental consideration include climate change risk, resource scarcity, and compliance with the evolving regulations. These factors can significantly impact property values through flood risks, energy efficiency requirements, or contamination liabilities. Social factors such as labor practice, common community relationships, and product safety affect the business valuations through reputation impacts, regulatory compliance costs, and operational continuity. Governance quality influence risk premiums in business valuations, with better governance typically commanding valuation premiums. So valuation report should explicitly address material ESG factors, documenting both current impacts and potential future implications for asset values. This emerging area requires valuers to develop new expertise and methodologies for quantifying traditionally qualitative factors. So this is important thing. So this is a newer things which are being incorporated worldwide in the valuation reports. So now it affects all the asset class. So as a values, especially the SFA values, they can become ESG values by having certain certifications. A full video on this topic is available on our Registered Values Club, our YouTube channel, so which you can access and go through it for becoming an ESG value. Now we will discuss what are the sources for information or guidance which are available for the IBBI registered values. First, they can refer to the IBBI guidance materials. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India provides extensive resources, including technical guides, practice directions, and interpretive notes. These official materials offer authoritative guidance on regulatory requirements and expected professional practices. And then you can have attend review training programs. Registered valuer organizations offers specialized training programs, workshops, and seminars for both initial qualifications and continuing professional developments. So these programs often include practical case studies and peer learning opportunities. Then several specialized textbooks, journals, and reference materials which are focusing on Indian valuation practices across different assets classes are available online as well as offline. You can refer to these professional references These resources provide in-depth technical knowledge beyond regulatory requirements. And then for a particular industry, you can refer to the industry database. So you can have subscription-based information services which provides access to the market transaction data, financial benchmarks, and economic indicator essentials for credible valuations. So these resources are particularly valuable for market approaches methodologies. So professional networking through industry associations, conferencing, and online forums provide valuable opportunities for knowledge sharing and collaborating problem solving. So this is one of the purpose of attending these CEPs. So this provides you a valuable opportunity for knowledge sharing and collaborative problem solving. That is why you are attending. It is not only that you are attending it from regulatory point of view. It also provides you a valuable opportunity for knowledge sharing and collaborative problem solving. So many RVOs facilitate these connections through member events and communication platforms. So what is a path forward? So next, we what is expected from all of us? First of all, we should learn and try to have professional excellence. We should proceed for highest standard in valuation practice. So all of us, means all the registered values, we should pursue for highest standard in the valuation practice. And we should make ethical commitments, means unwavering adherence to the professional integrity. We should continue to learn, which means it is ongoing development and knowledge process which we should all should attend and go through. And then it is not only that we should attend these type, we should actively participate in advancing the profession. Means all of us should make some professional contribution. So it is not just so having a 16-hour CPD, continuous professional development. All of us, we should actively participate in advancing our professions. So we all should make some professional contribution to the valuation profession. That is important thing. So the valuation profession in India stands at an important junction with the increasing recognition of its crucial critical role in financial markets, insolvency proceedings, and corporate transactions. As the regulatory framework continues to mature, registered values have both the opportunity and responsibility to shape profession's futures. So maintaining public trust through high quality objective valuations remains the cornerstone of our professional practice. This requires not only technical competence but also unwavering ethical standards and commitment to serving the public interest. By embracing continuous improvement, technological advancement, and professional collaboration, the valuation community can ensure it meets the evolving needs of Indian market. So this is all about best practices for IBBI registered values. So basically, the aim of this CPD is that you do not have need to attend it. All of you must actively participate in this continuous professional development program. You should make some contribution. Some of you should make some details about the things you have recently done, or difficulties you have faced during your valuation process, which are essential to be known to all of us. जो कुछ आपने सीखा है वो सभी से शेयर करोगे तो that will be better for all of us. So this is all from my side. Thank you, Sandeep ji, and we can have a general discussion on this subject.
Yes, sir. So friends, if you are having any doubt or question related to this subject or the whole slides which we have learned till now, you can unmute